And the Scottish Government has been accused of a pattern of secrecy in relation to the COVID-19 public inquiry. That accusation was made at Holyrood by Jackie Bailey, Scottish Labour's health spokesperson, after it was revealed that the chair of the inquiry had quit, as had 4 members of the council team. The Deputy First Minister John Swinney said the inquiry was independent and so he hadn't been told the reasons for the resignations. Well, Mr Swinney is with us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just so that we can be absolutely clear from the outset, you haven't been told the reasons for the council team's departure, or you can't tell us?
What I need to set out at the outset of this interview is that the COVID inquiry, like all inquiries under the 2005 Inquiries Act, operates independently of ministers. What that means is that ministers have the power to appoint a chair and to set the terms of reference. And then once that is done, it is essentially handed over to the chair of the inquiry to conduct that inquiry. The government doesn't monitor the inquiry, the government doesn't supervise the inquiry, and the government essentially has a relationship with the chair, and that culminated with Lady Poole advising me last Friday morning that she intended to resign from leading the inquiry.
Can you explain why you were sharing the news of Lady Poole's departure? You didn't tell anyone about that the 4 lawyers on the council team had resigned beforehand?
For the very obvious reason that I'm not in operational control of the inquiry and I do not speak for the inquiry. The issue I have to wrestle with is the fact that my duty under the law is to appoint the chair. The chair notified me of her intention to resign, and in my view, the correct judgment to apply was that I should advise parliamentary colleagues of the resignation of the chair, which is my legal obligation to ensure is properly advised to Parliament.
Because people will ask questions about why a chair would resign. It does raise questions about why a chair resigns after the resignation of the entire legal team that would proceed with this case.
Lady Poole indicated to me that she was resigning for personal reasons, and I have to respect that. I have no right to second guess that. I have no right to question that. I simply have to take it at face value and now concentrate on what is my legal duty, which is to make sure there is appropriate judicial leadership for the inquiry and that the inquiry can carry on to deliver against the terms of reference, which the government consulted upon widely, which was agreed, I think, pretty comprehensively across the parliamentary community and across wider society in Scotland, and to make sure that bereaved families and many other people can have the opportunity to have the issues about which they are concerned about the handling of COVID properly and fully addressed.
I just wonder, looking with hindsight, because ministers do have the power to remove the chair of an inquiry. If Lady Poole hadn't come to you and said that she was resigning, would you have removed her from it, given that the legal counsel that were working towards her had all quit?
I would have had absolutely no basis for doing so.
OK. If you don't know why any of that legal team quit, how do you ensure it doesn't happen again?
Well, what I've got to make sure is that we have in place judicial leadership that can take forward the inquiry. The Section 17 of the Inquiries Act gives the inquiry chair alone, rather than ministers, responsibility for deciding how an inquiry should operate. So that judicial leadership has got to work out what the staffing arrangements of the inquiry are, what the approach to gathering information will be, how they will take forward the holding of hearings, how they will produce and report in accordance with the terms of reference which I have set out, which is that we want the inquiry to report in a timeous fashion. So,
and Peter Watson was on earlier, and he basically says this is an entire. He basically says it's a poison challenge. He can't see why anybody would want to A, chair the inquiry, or B, work on the legal counsel team on this now.
I heard Professor Watson's interview this morning, and I'm actually meeting Professor Watson later on this afternoon, and I've had conversations with Professor Watson on a number of occasions in the preparation of the terms of reference. I haven't had recent conversations because I'm not involved in the inquiry. So I'll see him this afternoon, and it's important that I continue that dialogue with the representatives of bereaved families. But I think
do you have any timeline now for when you will actually appoint a chair, never mind when that chairperson will be able to appoint a legal team?
Well, I'm actively involved in that process. I'm talking to the Lord President, Lord Carloway, about the appointment of successor leadership to Lady Poole, and I want to progress to a conclusion on that as quickly as I possibly can do. But I think the important point about the inquiry is that it's got a vital role to perform in our country today, because people need to have answers to the way in which the COVID pandemic was handled. We've made very important progress in the setting of the scope of the inquiry, and
You
a lot
say
of work
that's
has been
progress, but it hasn't even decided core participants yet, let alone started taking any evidence. By the time you appoint a chair and it gets to work again, gosh, we're already a year out from the main part of the COVID pandemic. We'll be years out from it. How do we learn lessons then?
We have to get on and make sure this all happens so that we have that opportunity to learn lessons. That's what the government committed to doing. That's why I appointed Lady Poole back in December of last year. That's why we took early consultation on the scope of the inquiry, and we indicated to the inquiry to move forward. Now, there's a lot of work going on, because I know from my perspective the government is supplying information to the inquiry as we're being required to do, and that work is continuing to be undertaken. So there is work to progress the inquiry. We just need to make sure that the very real difficulties that have been created by the resignation of the chair last Friday are addressed as quickly as possible.
Can you give us any indication about who's being considered to chair the inquiry from here on in? Because we do currently have 5 different public inquiries underway in Scotland. There's got to be a limit to the number of judges or retired judges available to you.
That's correct, and that's I'm discussing these issues with Lord Carloway to take forward an appointment. It would be invidious and inappropriate of me to discuss any potential candidates at this stage, but I've indicated to Parliament I will return to Parliament with an update at the earliest possible opportunity, and that's exactly what I will do.
It does, I suppose, lead to the question of whether public inquiries are the best way to get answers about big cases like this.
I think there's a fine balance to be struck here on what questions we put to public inquiries, because I think, as you say, we have a number of public inquiries underway, and they are covering important topics that people judge to be appropriate for public inquiries. But there are limits to the number that can be sustained at any one time, and I think that's a point that Parliament has to be mindful of.
So how do you work through this? Because I'm looking at this. There's Sheikh Bio, the hospitals, trams, Scottish child abuse, and now the COVID inquiry. The trams so far has cost, £13 million. It's taken something like 7 years, and we still don't have any answers for that. How satisfied are you with the progress of the inquiries that we are all paying for?
Public inquiries are set up essentially to be independent of government, and I think I've got to be very careful about commenting about the progress of particular inquiries, because it is fundamentally for the leadership of the inquiries under the law to set out how those inquiries should progress. And if the government starts to put constraints on inquiries, then I think there'll be a bit of a hullabaloo about the government interfering in the inquiries. In the questions I answered,
not even in terms of budget or the length of time it takes.
Well, let me just address the point fully. In Parliament yesterday, I was accused by opponents of both interfering too much or interfering not enough in the inquiries. And what I said to Parliament yesterday, which is my view, is that I'm just following the law, and the law requires me and ministers to establish inquiries, put in place a chair, set out our terms of reference, and then allow the inquiry to timeously come to their conclusions. And it's up to inquiries to do that and to report accordingly.
A lot of these inquiries are asking difficult questions about government-run institutions. Could it be some sceptics might suggest that a public inquiry or deciding that there's going to be a public inquiry is a way to kick difficult discussions down the road?
No, because if you look, for example, at the Scottish child abuse inquiry that Lady Smith is presiding over, Lady Smith has taken an approach which has involved the creation of a number of different modules of the inquiry. When she has completed one of those modules, she has reported on the contents and reported very quickly on the contents of that particular module. So there's no kicking of issues down the track. Those issues are being addressed right away, reported on, and those findings have been put into the public domain and those conclusions. And I think there's some really interesting lessons about how that can be undertaken.
What's your best guesstimate now as to when the COVID-19 inquiry will get underway again?
Well, the COVID inquiry is underway. It is gathering evidence. It is doing the necessary work. Lady Poole has given me notice of her intention to resign, but she remains in the leadership of the inquiry for a period of up to 3 months as we secure new leadership.
So you'll guarantee that you'll have a new chair within the next 3 months?
So the inquiry is able to undertake its work and to continue that activity, and I'm obviously very focused with the Lord President, Lord Carloway, on securing judicial leadership for the inquiry at the earliest possible opportunity.
Deputy First Minister John Swinney, thank you very much indeed once again for your time.